Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. I'm a coach for highly sensitive people and empaths, and I've been working with empaths for many years now. I have a program called From Suffering Sponge to Sensitive Savant that teaches empaths how to stop sponging. And when I started my business, I really thought, oh my God, this is what empaths really need, because when you actually absorb other people's burdens energetically, so not just psychologically, but energetically, you end up carrying that around in your aura, your energy field, and it really burdens you. And that becomes part of, let's say, your manifesting soup. So all that rage and fear and drama from other people that you're slurping up becomes part of the container and the material that you use to live your life, to perceive the world, to create your reality, and to create anything you want to create. It comes from all of that soup, right? So the more negativity that you sponge up from other people, the harder it becomes for you to actually create the things you really want to create, the happy things you want to create. So, the way I was looking at it, I was like, this sponging has got to go ASAP. It's got to go. But of course, like being a coach and starting out, like you have these ideals, and then you start doing the work with people, and you get challenged in your ideals, in your thoughts about how all this works. And I've been challenged a lot in many things. And even though the techniques I teach definitely work, there are a significant number of people who are truly empaths who don't want to do this work. They're not interested. They're like, they're aware of it. They know that I can teach them this. They don't want it. And over the years, I've been thinking, like, what could be the benefits for someone? Like, why might someone be better off not undoing their empath sponging? Because ideally, someone drops the empath sponging and they just have like an easier life after. But also it's a life that's based on a different kind of foundation. And it's something that I think not everybody's ready for. Not everybody's ready to take that step. Not everybody wants to take that step. Some people like to be entangled with other people. But more importantly, I think there might be really big soul reasons why it can be necessary for people to be empath sponges and actually suffer for a while. Not to make them feel bad, but because of certain things that they learn in that way. So I want to talk about that in this video. Okay. So the first misconception about empaths is that all empaths are very empathetic and very caring, and that they want you to feel good and they want you to feel better. This is not true. Many empaths are, but being an empath does not mean being very empathetic. That's a bit of an oversimplification. Being an empath means that you absorb energies from other people into your energy field, but not just any energies, because there's more to this story than just that, but I'll stick to just the empaths here. But you absorb other people's burdens, other people's pain, right? So not the good stuff, because there are people out there absorbing the good stuff, the energy vampires. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the empaths who absorb the burdens, the pain, the suffering. Now, many empaths, when they absorb this burden, this pain, this suffering, they are aware of the suffering that the other person is going through on some level, and they understand it emotionally, right? But not all empaths do. There are also people on the autism spectrum who are very, very clueless about emotions, are very uninterested in understanding emotions, who are also empaths, and they just perceive it as annoying, prickly stuff. Get this annoying, prickly stuff away from me. Right? So there's no compassion there. There's no empathy. There's no, oh, I'm sorry that you're sad. I'm sorry that you're frustrated. I'm sorry that you're struggling, that you're afraid, because they don't feel it that way. They don't perceive it that way. They're just like annoying, prickly stuff. Right? And so, and that's one version. You can also have people who are not on the autism spectrum, who are also disconnected from their feelings, who also do not know what emotions are about and what they mean. And then because of that, there's not going to be any empathy, right? Because in order to have empathy, you need to understand what somebody's actually feeling and what it's about, and that it makes sense, and not just icky stuff is coming off of them, yucky, go away, So I just want to, like, there are empaths who, that's how they relate to others. They're like, yucky stuff coming off of that person, yucky stuff coming off of that person. Again, no understanding, no empathy, okay? So for those people, right, people who they feel something, they feel a lot from others, and they take it on, but they don't know what they're actually feeling. This could be this could be kind of a learning process where emotions are really forced on them from all sides, and they have to start to learn to make sense of it. It could be part of this kind of soul growth of saying, okay, you've been resisting emotions, you have been not wanting to learn about emotions, you have been ridiculing emotions, you have been pushing emotions away. Now the universe is going to flood you with emotions from all sides. Your own, other people's emotions are going to be everywhere until you start taking them seriously, right? It kind of is in your face. So this could be soul growth. There could be benefit there in stewing in that emotional soup. Obviously, I don't recommend stewing in that too long because it's very overwhelming, but there might be a period where it's useful to sit in that and just realize how much emotion is there in the world, and that it's real, and that it's not something you can deny or pretend that doesn't exist. Okay, so that's one. I had a few more. Okay. Another thing can be if you are someone who, and then we're kind of taking the multiple lifetimes perspective. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. But then this one's not going to make a lot of sense. So if you're someone who, you're kind of clueless about how you impact others, right? And you want to, on a soul level, you want to learn and understand better what your impact on other people is. Well, being an empath is a great way to understand your impact on others because you get instant emotional feedback, right? You interact with somebody and you get an emotional reaction back from the person. And you're going to feel it in your own body, right? So it's not something that's easy to ignore. So it can ideally make you more aware of the kinds of back and forths that are happening in interactions between you and other people. When you do this, how does it make the other person feel, right? And you don't have to try really hard to go feel it when you're an empath because the energies just come at you really hard because you are, on some level, you are sucking it in, you're pulling it in. And so but that's subconscious. That's on a really, really deep, more difficult to access level, something I teach my empath clients, but just in daily life, that's just happening and you're just like, experiencing it, not really doing anything to make it happen. And so, let's say that you're kind of like a blunt and rude person and you're like, on the soul level, you're like, I want to grow, I want to become like a more rounded, kinder person. Then every time you're blunt and someone feels sad or angry or fearful or anxious, around you, then when that feeling comes at you right away, they feel that way, and then it's right here because you're an empath, and then you walk around with that feeling for days. You're kind of forced to think about it. You're kind of forced to take it on board and to consider, how is this, like, where does this come from, right? And maybe I said something to upset that person, but I didn't realize, right? So these could be great training wheels for folks who really need to learn to actually empathize and understand their impact on others, because you get that instant boomerang, really intense, really overwhelming feedback. So being an empath can really in that way teach you about the suffering of other people. By the way, that can be a separate point too. It's not even about your interaction with them. It can also just be that you become aware of the suffering of the other people because you're constantly sponging it. So you're around someone who looks really happy and looks really great and like successful, and then you're picking up on all this depression from them or all this anxiety. You realize, there's more going on. This person's also suffering. They're not just that success picture that they look like on the outside. So it's a way to learn about the suffering of others if that's something that you were not aware of before, or maybe it's something you're just interested in learning more about. Being an empath will teach you about this, right? So it can actually be very meaningful in that way to get a really much bigger understanding of the suffering going on underneath the surface for many, many people. And then lastly, empath sponging can really confront you with the emotional energies that you're most afraid of and most avoidant of, because it's the emotional energies that you're most stressed out about, that you're like, oh, those are bad energies. Oh, I don't want to feel those. Nobody should have those feelings. Those are the ones that you're most likely to sponge as an empath. So those are the energies that are going to be kind of in your face all the time. So in this way, it can be a way for you to have to be forced to acknowledge and deal with all these emotions that you're constantly kind of on some level, you're resistant to, you don't want to deal with them, you're afraid of them, you think they're bad, you're trying to push them away. And being an empath like puts them in your face all the time, right? Now, obviously, there's also ways in which this is a kind of soul growth. Like, if I imagine this is kind of like a soul plan, like I'm going to teach myself in this life, I'm going to teach myself, how to become aware of this, and I'm going to do it through being an empath. Let's imagine that's a path. Of course, a path can go wonky, right? Because what happens with a lot of empaths is they get so overwhelmed, they just shut down and they dissociate. And this is actually really, really dangerous because it can lead to all kinds of other energy problems, and it can lead to a kind of transition where someone transitions from being an empath into being what I call a psychic narcissist, which is essentially a psychic vampire, which is someone who goes from sponging people's pain to sponging people's good stuff and sucking them dry and killing all the good vibes around them, basically. This is something that can happen, right? So empaths can be so filled with suffering and overwhelm that and become so kind of tapped out that part of them just kind of goes, I don't give a shit anymore. I don't give a shit about anyone suffering. Now I just want to be all me. And they can kind of go from being, if they were very empathic before and they actually cared a lot about people and stuff, then they can kind of go from that to the other side and being like, no, I don't give a shit. Whatever happens to people, I don't care. I just want what I want and I just want to take it, right? Or it can be this kind of, well, I've given so much, now I deserve to get some stuff back. But it can also be someone who, was never that empathic. Yes, they were empaths, but they were never so empathic. They never really understood so much like what the other person was going through, but they just picked up on like icky sensations, right? Because if you're emotionally clued in, oh, this is grief. But if you're not emotionally clued in, you might feel it as icky, dark energy or something, And it's being able to make that translation that is really your emotional intelligence, understanding this is what this is what it means, this is why it's here, and it's not just, get it away from me. So there's no guarantee, this is what I'm trying to say, there's no guarantee that you're taking on this empath burden is actually going to teach you what it might ideally teach you. It could kind of throw you into a pit of despair where you just make worse and worse choices from there, which is one of the reasons I was very, very adamant and very enthusiastic and very just committed to getting empaths to get help and make changes. And at some point I created this whole year series of emails to like teach people about this, like teach empaths about this, like this is what can happen if you don't get this sorted out. And I just, at some point I deleted all of it because I realized none of this is making a difference. People are, for whatever reason deciding whether they want to be empaths and carry the burden or whether they want to learn to let it go. And they're on different soul trajectories and they're learning different things. And maybe this is something they have to go through. And a lot of people recently have been going into psychic narcissism, have been becoming psychic narcissists. There's been this whole 2-year period of, during the whole pandemic really, where I've seen so many people just jump off that cliff and just, they were empathetic and caring before and now they're just like full on psychic narcissism. And part of them just kind of gave up. Part of them was just like, I'm disillusioned with the world. I don't care anymore. It's like they stopped believing in the good things and they just said, oh, well, then I'll just give in to something that's easier. Which is also, it was really stressful to become aware of and to notice happening. And a lot of people that I knew, a lot of people that also I used to work with, that I've helped, who've benefited from learning techniques and then were fine for many years. And then suddenly they're like, I don't give a shit. What? Becoming a psychic narcissist. Like, what? So that's also really forced me to think about like what are the benefits and the downsides, and why might people just really not be ready or want to put those burdens down, or even if they do put the burdens down, then still they just want to kind of loop themselves into another kind of suffering and darkness, because psychic narcissism is ultimately a kind of suffering and darkness. Yes, it's the kind of, psychic narcissism is when people take the good stuff, good vibes from other people, and there's a whole kind of technical side to that, but I'm not going to bug you with that here. But also, like, initially, it's, for some people initially it feels really good. For some people initially it feels very stressful. But there's a period, there's a kind of timeline where they can get away with it. And then there's a point where they get so far into that way of doing things and doing life that their body truly cannot sustain it anymore, and they start developing all kinds of really creepy and incurable diseases, and things start to go really wonky. So it's like some people who go on this path, they think they've really found the holy grail. They're like, yay, I have so much energy now and I feel so amazing, because they're stealing it from everyone. But really what they're doing is they're cutting themselves off from the roots. And ultimately, this whole thing is going to backfire on them. And by then, it's too late for them to really find their way back, because they're so deeply embedded in this dark stuff that they're doing. And the tricky thing is that a lot of people who are empaths, or very sensitive to energy, they do have this ability to become psychic narcissists. It's kind of like where their mindset is at, where they're not just their conscious like mindset up here, but like in their whole system and their whole body, like where they're at with believing in the goodness of the world. And you know, it's like with anything, like you can use fire to cook and to create a meal and to keep people warm, and you can use fire to just terrorize people and burn down homes. It goes both ways, right? And it's the same with energy sensitivity. You can use it for good. You can become someone who is very, very attuned to others and understanding and knows what they're going through without them having to say anything. And you can use that for good, but you can also use that to manipulate and to abuse people, right? There are some very, very talented, let's say, psychic, energetic folks out there who are very clued into what people are going through, and they use it to manipulate, and they use it to extract resources, whether that's energetic resources or it's like actual money. And, you know, they get people to do things they want because they know how to manipulate someone in a very deep level beyond what that person's even aware of, because they can sense where someone's at, right? So this is it's a really tricky gift to have, in a sense. Like if you're an empath, there's this really simplistic idea out there of empaths are good and amazing angels. No, empaths are not necessarily empathic. Many of them are, but they're not necessarily. And also, being an empath is not a fixed, forever kind of thing. It can morph into something else, right? And so what I've tried to explain in this video is like there's reasons why carrying the empath burdens might actually be part of your soul journey, your soul growth. It might be useful for you on some level. But also, there's many ways in which if you don't deal with what is going on beneath the surface inside of yourself, it can lead to all kinds of darkness and despair that can put you on a different path, that can put you on a very unhealthy path. But you know, like the learning for me the last 2 years has been, there's so many people taking that dark path, like okay, whatever. I've tried educating and talking about this and getting people to notice what's going on and warning them before it was happening. And in the end, it just doesn't make a difference. You know, if someone's making that soul choice on some level to go into that dark space, I can maybe like postpone it for a year if I try really hard and help them with all kinds of things and like teach them all kinds of techniques and like, you know, talk to them and keep them positive and all of that. But ultimately, they still go down that same path. So yeah, I could talk about this a long time. I don't want to burden you with like my kind of coach experiences around this, but I do think some of it is interesting to share because I want to kind of nuance that conversation about empaths, because it's really exploded over the last few years and it's become so incredibly simplistic, and empaths are good and they're angels on earth and they're trying to like helping and saving everyone, and it's really just not what that is at all. And Also, a lot of what passes as empath, a lot of people who are like, oh, this person's an empath or I'm an empath, they're not actually empaths. There's a lot of different things that can look like empath, but it's actually something else. So this is something that I'm very strict with. If somebody comes to me and they're like, I'm an empath and I want to get help with that, I'm like, great, let's first make sure that you actually are an empath and it's not something else. Because it could be that you're clairsentient, it could be that you're just quite ungrounded and that you therefore pick up on stuff from other people. It could be that your own feelings are getting triggered in a way that feels very foreign. There's lots of things that can be going on. By the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm interested in empaths and I think I might be one, but I'm not sure, and you really want to figure this out for real and you want to figure this out on your own, because we can also set up a clarity call and I can just kind of test some things with you, and if I can't figure it out that way, I can do a long distance healing and know for sure, right? So I have like a 2-step process where I can figure out with you and for you if you're an empath. But if you want to do this yourself, I've created a little audio course to figure out if you're an empath, and I'll put that in the link, and explains what exactly empaths are, like what are the other things that seem like empath but aren't, and how do you figure out the difference for yourself? Like, what do you need to pay attention to? What are the kinds of situations where you might be confused, where it might seem like it's one thing but it's actually something else? How do you know the difference? I really lay it all out for you so that you can spend the next couple of weeks, maybe months. It does take a little while because you need to kind of observe things, observe situations, but I show you what to pay attention to and how to figure out if you're actually an empath. Because I do think it's important, because if you know that you are one, then you need to decide, what are you going to do, right? Like, do you feel like it has some kind of soul benefit for you to be an empath? Is it teaching you something that you just need to go through? Or is it a burden that you're ready to put down? All right, I'll put the link to that self-study resource below. Thanks so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. Bye-bye.